Thank you very much. So, as I try to learn from our founder director, I will ask, who of you has been to London before? No, actually, I will ask who has been to Hackney. The people here, right. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is the research project I'm involved in and working with on Strictly Observant Religion, Gender and the State. And the place that I've been doing the first part of the fieldwork is actually in Hackney, more precisely in Stamford Hill. I come to that in a second. Where this research lies is actually, I think, of two societal dynamics and developments that are really interesting at this moment. The first one is the dynamics in the field of gender and sexuality in terms of liberalizing sexual norms, but also more attentiveness to gender-based violence. We have legalization of same-sex marriage in different countries and the introduction of mandatory sex and relationship education in schools. Again, this is not a teleological one-way story, but we definitely have a lot of dynamicism around that. At the same time, we see quite a lot of dynamics in the field of religion in terms of socially conservative movements. So we can observe a rise of, and we can talk about the terminology, observant, strictly observant religious groups that are often considered or called fundamentalist among some parts of the media as well. So we actually see a resurgence or a strengthening, at least, among Hasidic, often called ultra-Orthodox Jews, among different conservative forms of Islam, including Salafi groups, Tablighi Jamaat, Deobandi groups, but also among Pentecostal churches. And just to give you one number that really struck me, in London in the last, I think, decade, it was 800 new churches opened, complicating our notions of secularization, of course. And what is interesting here is that many of these groups actually concentrate in particular areas, and Stamford Hill and Hackney is one of them. Wembley and Brent would be another one. Particular kind of certain parts of the north of Manchester, for instance, or the south of Manchester are another one. So what we're interested in this project is to understand why are these strictly observant forms of religiosity so attractive, particularly to young people. And how do these communities challenge, but also how are they challenged by the liberalizing gender and sexual norms that we've discussed? And finally, how do these questions of gender intersect with other questions like ethnicity, like socioeconomic deprivation, particularly in these very diverse urban settings? So what I'm doing is a comparative research on Jewish, Muslim and Christian groups in Stamford Hill in Hackney. So this is very tentative and just illustrative. So all the yellow stars basically here are Jewish institutions of one way or another. So just to give you a sense, kind of this is Finsbury Park here. And this is kind of the north of Hackney that you're seeing in North London. All the green ones are churches or Christians institutions, and the kind of the red ones, either the heart or these ones are mosques. So you see some actually there on top, but more on the south. You have more of a kind of Turkish community, particularly in the south. And this is kind of the heart of Stamford Hill, if you want. And this area has been kind of a long-standing area of Jewish settlement, but it's also been an area of contestation. As we see, for instance, this article called "The Battle for Stamford Hill," the author, a long-term resident, complained about that the manners of interaction are decreasing, or the morality of interaction, that the people there, particularly the Orthodox Jews, wouldn't really look at her, and the question arises, how do these groups actually live together? So that's where I came in, and I spent a couple of months trying to understand what are the dynamics around gender and sexuality. And so one of the events, just to give you a bit of a taste, is a Verbrengen, a very traditional Orthodox kind of form of coming together and discussing mythology discussing the birth, or in that sense, celebrating the life of the foundings of the rabbis. And just an interesting thing that struck me at that particular event was that I was immediately asked, being the only non-Jew there, to help with the cutlery and help with like serving the table and everything. And that, of course, was something that all men were doing. So something actually, very often if you go, for instance, in the churches where you see a kind of a gender division of the kind of the domestic work being done by women. So kind of a certain complication already of kind of what kind of gender divisions we have. And just to give you a couple of more kind of snapshots really from my work. The next one is another map, is a road that I found, the Chasm road, which is that one here, which one of the head rabbis of the Hasidic community called kind of really an really enigmatic an iconic road. And the reason for that being that you see several synagogues along that street, several Jewish schools, but also actually 4 different Muslim schools. So you have 2 here, one is over there, and you have the Tawhid boys school. You have there kind of the bells and some Satmar communities here. Here you can get your kind of Orthodox food and so on. And on that road you would see, because there's so many young people, every day kind of vast swathes of traditionally close Muslims and Jews walking around there and mingling, but also there's a cooperation in terms of security. So they actually have arrangements protecting the mosques and the synagogues, and they cooperate quite a lot around that. So some people in the area actually have said this is one of the kind of examples of Muslim-Jewish cooperation that is incredibly intense and successful, that we don't see that often in the world. Another point of contention, this is the Chasm Road Mosque, which looks quite small and kind of British in a sense. If you go down this entrance, you will have a prayer space for around 1,200 people. The next one thing, kind of just snapshot I'm presenting to you, is kind of from the contestation between the ultra-Orthodox or Hasidic schools and Ofsted, actually, around the inspection. So this is actually from a freedom of information request that some of the rabbis were filing, asking about the cooperation between the humanists and Ofsted. So their argument is actually what is kind of repressing us from the government side really is Ofsted through the humanists. And this was one of the key elements that they mentioned. And just finally, other ways again where kind of sexuality is contested and kind of masculinity is reinvented really is this kind of Pentecostal church program, forging intelligent men, because, as it says, all men want to be superheroes at the end of the day. So we see kind of masculinity not just being something that is traditional, but also something that is being reinvented. So to sum up, I think, yes, there are conflicts between kind of liberalizing sexual and gender norms, but very often they're actually not where we think they are. And I think if we want to try to find solutions of cooperation and fostering equality, we might actually ask different questions and look at different places than we usually do. Thank you very much.